For the last 2 years, I've just been working at CalArts, and where we do basically a film every year. So I finished a film about Bigfoot falling in love with a hunter that he thinks is another female Sasquatch.
Excusez-moi, est-ce que cela vous dérangerait? Elle chante un air de son faubourg. Elle rêve à des serments d'amour. Elle pleure et ah, oh mon Dieu, c'est Bigfoot!
I had an internship at Pixar Animation Studios, which is the most humbling experience I've ever had. So now I just recently was hired at Pixar for an animation position, so I'm gearing up for that. And I hope to use all the knowledge gained here at the studio to make it as good of an experience as possible. Actually, the trenches is the perfect word to describe the whole Pixar, at least the internship. It was really fun, and like our supervisors were extremely supportive, but it was the trenches. Like we slept at the studio, especially the last 2 weeks. We just like would crash on the couch, get up at 6 in the morning, go back on the computer, and it's really like a marathon where you're running, and then like you stop to take a drink of water and you look how far you've come, and you've just come miles. And you're like, whoa, okay, well it is kind of paying off, and then you just have to put your head right back into the game and keep running. Before you know it, you're getting stronger, but at the end you're just exhausted. Yeah, we were just working on the Incredibles characters, just doing dialogue tests that were in the movie, which is hard because it's hard to divorce your mind from what you've seen in the movie. And so you have these lines like, I've been a terrible father, and you're like, I know that scene. That's when he's chained up in syndromes. Oh, you're like, oh, how do I? Okay, you gotta like invent a different scenario in your head. And you're like, okay, they're at Disneyland, and his kid just died on Splash Mountain. I've been a terrible father. That's what he's saying, And it's really good. Like the first test I did, I showed it to Bobby Podesta, and he's like, "So where's your character?" And I'm like, "He's in the computer." And they're like, "No, where is he?" I'm like, "I don't know." And so they're like, "We got to figure that out." And so it's really good. And they're good about. They don't give you answers. They give you questions to ask to find the answers, and you're like, "All right." So it's frustrating, and you just want to shake them down and tell me how to do it, but. I think the best part was just working one-on-one with those guys, and they had what are called the Three Caballeros, which are the 3 supervising animators from The Incredibles. And these guys know Bob Incredible and Elastigirl more than anybody, and they're telling you about the characters. And you think like with drawing, you can be off model because you can draw the character incorrectly. So you think when you get in the computer, you can't be off model because it's there. It's Bob Incredible. But you're wrong. Like you can do these facial expressions that are too goofy or like too stale, and it's like, no, there is a model for Bob Incredible, and it's the acting, it's the performance. And so having like Alan Barolero and Steve Hunter come in and go, that's not Bob, and you're like, I'm sorry, I'll do my best. Because when the character comes in CG, they're just like this, and they're gray and bald, and they're in this unitard, and you're like, oh, it's so like, at least with a white paper, you're neutral, but in the computer, you start off in the negative, and you're like, okay, it's dead, and I have to like, like bring it to life. So. There was a couple Frankenstein moments in there where you all of a sudden press play and it is alive, and you're like, oh, it's alive, and you start screaming and they kick you out and you're suspended for a couple weeks, but eventually they bring you back. We got to go into dailies, which is where John Lasseter is in there, and he is, critiquing the shots, and so they're playing these scenes from Cars, and it just looks great, and you're like, yeah, I would pass that, and they're like, oh, the rear view mirror isn't loaded, and it's like the car that's like 4th in the background. You're like, what? Oh, I didn't even pay attention to that. And their eyes are so keen. And the first dailies we went into, we just kind of, it was already in progress, and we could just feel like that electricity, the tension in the room. So we go in, and we're like, ooh, okay, I bet they can smell our fear. And so we go in, they just like sit us down, and one of the animators goes, oh, by the way, the interns are here. And John Lasseter's like, stand them up. And so we're like, ooh. And so we stand up, and we're like, hey. And they didn't even ask us what our names were. They're like, okay, so just, hi, this is John. And so we turned around to see John Lasseter, and Bob Peterson, who's one of the story guys, goes, face forward, do not look at your director. We're like, oh, and we laughed. And it was just, they're so good about taking their artwork seriously, but also, it's just, you need to have fun. And you cannot let your work make you unhappy, and they definitely don't. And so that kind of relieved the tension. But then we did sit down, and one of the animators was like, we didn't ask them for their name. And Sanjay Patel, one of the supervising animators, was like, "Only in death does an intern deserve a name." And they all laughed, but nobody ever asked us our name ever again. And so we just kind of, nobody knew our name. We're like, all right. But no, they were really friendly, and we got to meet, like, you know, all our heroes, and, you know, and just, it was very inspiring and very humbling and just exciting. I am about the most technologically inept person that I've ever known. I've definitely at least gotten to where I don't get, like, the blue screen of death anymore. And, like, it doesn't just shut down. Or if it does, I can just restart and, like, wait. You know, at least I know that step. And, yeah, it's actually been very, very helpful because not only with computer animation, but also when you draw up your film, you have to edit it together. And, I mean, you have weak spots, but you have to make them, you don't have to make the things you hate, you know, your masterful skills, but you at least just have to, like, become a filmmaker. And that means you have to know editing programs. And as much as you hate the computer, you got to love the filmmaking process, and you got to, you know, learn everything. And learning how to edit, like, hopefully, you know, I'll never have to worry about that in a real job session or setting, but I will have, you know, I'll know what the editors are going through. So, you know, when I see my scene get trimmed, I won't be like, yeah, I'll be like, you know what, it's for the story. It's, you know, whatever needs to be done. So just remember, as, you know, an animator, you should be a filmmaker first. As an editor, filmmaker first. Like, you shouldn't just focus really narrow-mindedly on just your, like, an animator who's just worrying about his scene isn't going to have the best scene. It's the guy who's thinking about the whole film and looking at the journey the character goes on. And not only that, but just look at other people's work. And, like, I mean, I'm not very open-minded, but at least, you know, I'm willing to, like, look at other people's stuff and then tell them it's awful. You know, and, like, I would just say, like, take in as much as you can so that when you're putting your artwork out, you at least have a library of knowledge to choose from. So take in as much filmmaking as you can, and when you're working on a film, take in as much of that film as you can. And think about the characters, and think about the whole picture, and think about the audience. Because there's a lot of filmmakers out there that just, it's for me, and it doesn't need to communicate, and those audiences are the ones that are slitting their wrists and, like, asking for their money back. You need to really, don't be a sellout. You don't need to do, you know, just joke, 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 but respect your audience. And they're coming in the movie theater. These guys have paid $8. I mean, gas mileage, you know, gas prices are high, so you need to, like, you know, make their money, you know, well spent, and just give them what they're coming into the theater for, like a good story.